Hey, this is Rob, and this is the fourth video in my snakeskin CNC snare drum build series. I'm starting the video with this photo that is where the drum is at the end of this video. At the start of this video, the snare drum is still unfinished, and the brass lugs are actually just 3-foot brass tubes that haven't even been delivered to my house yet. Before we can add finish, there are a few imperfections I need to worry about on the drum itself. I really do like myrtle wood. It's got great character. It takes finish so beautiful. I really do like it. But there always are more imperfections with it. Whether it's knots where branches have started to come out or a bit of live edge, lots of little things. These sections I usually clean up with a wire brush. Then at this point, I'm filling this one with black super glue, and then I'll add some accelerator to quick dry it. I'll do the same thing on another section here. Inside the drum, there was even a bigger section, more of a knot hole that was more substantial. I used some black epoxy on that one, then sanded out. This is the first time I've tried the black super glue accelerator trick, and I have to say, I'm sold. This worked very well. After a lot of sanding, and then wetting the drum to graze the grain, and then more sanding yet, it's time to finally start putting down some finish. I'm doing the inside first to show that first coat, how the grain pops when you add the finish to it. As I said previously, I just love the way myrtle wood reacts as you add the finish to it. The grain really pops, and what's really special about myrtle wood specifically, as the sunlight hits it at different angles, you see different layers of definition. It's hard to explain, but I'll try to show it off later in the video when the finishing process is more complete. The finish I use is Armor Seal. It's a wipe-on polyurethane finish that I really like. It puts down very thin layers, and you need to put multiple layers down and sand between, but I'll get to that later. I buy it by the gallon, and then I put it in these plastic bags, fill up my little cup, and then squeeze out all the air. I tried to show a picture of squeezing out the air, and I missed the top of that before I put it on, but I squeeze all the air out so it lasts a long time when the air does not react with it. This is not the first coat of finish I've put on the outside of the drum. At this point, I think I've done 4 coats, and I sand between after every 2, get it nice and smooth. Myrtle wood is temperamental, trying to get a good finish. The first layers absorb quite a bit, and it raises the grain a little bit, even though I raise the grain with water ahead of time and sanding. It's just a little bit temperamental. It takes a lot of work to get a good finish on it. I'm curious if spraying a finish might help, but I don't think it would. So again, put a layer down, let it dry, another layer down, then sand, either with very light sandpaper or with the 3M pads, just scuff it and get a better finish. I think I finished up with 8 layers on this drum before I got finally happy. The first time you put finish down, you don't get a nice gloss, even though it's the same finish every time. It takes quite a few layers to build up to get it just right. So I'll speed up the film now so we get this a little faster. This is pretty much all you're going to see of me laying down finish on this drum. It's not real exciting, doesn't make for good YouTube videos. The rest of the video is going to concentrate on making the brass tubes, cutting them, tapping them, drilling, all sorts of stuff, getting a nice patina finish. So let's move on to that process next. Before we can start working on the brass tubes, first I need to make a jig on the CNC machine. This is VCarve Pro. That's where I actually do my design work for all the CNC stuff. This is a jig I'm going to use to help cut the brass tubes, and I will drill the side of the brass tubes, which can be a pain, and I also will tap those holes I just drilled in the side of the brass tubes. Obviously there's 4 parts here. You can see the channel in here, and on this side. That's where the brass tube will lay. I'm calling this one the base, the bottom. I cut a pocket out here, so this piece right here will go right here. I'll glue that in place. And from here to here is exactly 5 inches. I want to cut these brass tubes off of 5 inches. Notice how the channel, this cutout is lower than the channel, and same as this one, this piece will go here and flip over, so the brass tube will be able to hang out the side of the jig here. And I even designed it so there's a little bit of a gap right here, which is just wide enough for a hacksaw blade. I'm foreshadowing what we're going to do with the jig in a little bit. And this piece flips over upside down on top of that, so it conforms the jig. 4 holes here match up to the 4 holes here. I will put a screw through there and hold it tight. We'll hold the jig in place so it won't move around when I'm cutting with a hacksaw or drilling the holes or tapping the holes. So let's go back to where I designed this. There are 4 different tool paths here. This one is the molding tool path, which is that one right there. Instead of a molding tool path, you have a shape that you're going to cut, that is the shape we're going to cut. I'm going to go ahead and... This is the exact size of the brass tube, and I want there to be just a little bit of a gap there, that's what that represents. I'm going to go in there, so there'll be a touch of a gap so you can clamp down. There won't be any give room for the brass tube to move around. So let's go back to that tool path. And this line, even though these lines right here don't look like they're centered, once you include this piece, the center point there, that is centered right on those holes, which those are the holes we'll drill through and tap through into the brass tube. And there's the pieces we saw before. Here's the cutaway, the pocket, and that cutaway there. And that's all of it. Let's out of the CNC machine and cut this jig out. The first step in the process, I'm going to cut the channels that the brass tubes will lay in. I'm using an 1/8" ball nose bit. A ball nose is a rounded end. And I'll cut those 2 channels, both in the base and the top, that'll flip over eventually. The next step, I've switched over to an end mill, 1/8" again. With the end mill, first I will drill all the holes we saw in the design, and then I will pocket out the areas on the base, the top, and the end plate. And now that those pockets are drilled, we'll do the tool path that cuts out all those pieces. When I do CNC work for a YouTube video, I normally don't use dust collection, which it makes a heck of a mess. The things I do for you guys. Anyway, once it's done cutting, I will quick vacuum up the excess, and we will go from there. Here is the jig we just cut out. I mentioned before how there's that hole in the side so I can slide the brass rod through, and I will get it nice to the end so I know it's exactly going to come out 5 inches. Drill it down so it's a little bit tight, verify, and then drill it down the whole way. And that tube is held in place now. It's not going anywhere. Get out my trusty handy dandy hacksaw and cut that. My blade's actually a little bit dull, so I'm going to speed that way the heck up. Remove this 4 screws and take it out and see what it looks like. And we will repeat the process till we have, well, I need 10 lugs, but actually it worked out right, so it came out to 11, which is a good thing. And there's actually a small piece left over in the end, which you'll see the leftover piece on the bottom of the screen right now. That'll be like 4.5 inches long, so not quite long enough. So I have 10 plus 1 extra and one that's not even really an extra. That'll be kind of my test mule I can test on before I work on the real ones. And once again, the dull hacksaw blade, so we speed that up. When I started this process, I had a brass tube that was partial left over from last time I tried making some brass lugs. And I got 4 out of that, plus that little 4.5 inch test one we talked about. So there's the 4. At this point, I am waiting for UPS to deliver my rods that I ordered from MasterCar. So I'm in a little bit of a holding process right now, but soon enough I'll have more, and I can finish up with the rest of the lugs I need for this project. Next step is to drill holes in the side of those lugs. If you've tried doing this without some kind of jig, you know that drilling a hole onto a round object is a pain and bad things happen. It very rarely comes out right when you don't have something like this. With this jig, I can do, well, 40 holes in only a few minutes, and they all came out very nice. If you're paying close attention, you noticed I put the word tap on the bottom of that jig, and of course, I'm going to tap from that side. I've lined up the screw holes from that brass rod, and I'll tap through that hole. I didn't have that word tap there, and on the top, I also have added the word drill. It's easy to get mixed up, and once you run the tap through a drill hole, it kind of ruins that jig. So you might guess what happened there and why I had to redo the top piece, but we'll go from there. I also learned that if you redo the top piece for drilling through, you shouldn't use plywood because hardwood works better. If you use plywood, the drill bit will fray the edges and ream it out a little bit, and suddenly it's a little too big. So another lesson learned there. Always use hardwood instead of plywood for something like that. I've been told in the past, if you don't take a picture, it didn't happen. That's kind of a nice way of saying prove that something actually works. Well, video works even better than pictures, and here I am showing how my screws work great on the side of that lug. After tapping the sides of the lugs, I need to tap the ends. This will be 12-24 hole pattern, different pattern than on the sides. 12-24 is what drum tension rods use. To those of you who watched my previous video on making some lugs, I use the same jig to hold the brass rod in place. That actually works great. I'll put some oil on this. It's not officially cutting oil, but it's pretty close to that. Using the same tap I used previously, and it works okay. It's getting a little bit older and a little bit duller, but it does great until it breaks a little later. Of course, you drill 20 taps, 22 technically, because I was doing an extra lug, and it breaks on the 18th one. So I was almost done. I'll show a picture of that in the second when I'm done. The good thing is, I was doing an extra lug. I had 11 tubes, and you lose one, it takes you out of 10. Of course, that makes you very careful of the last ones, because when you have no extras, it's, again, a little scary. There's a higher pucker factor when you're doing this. So I had to wait a few days for Amazon to deliver another tap for me. Whole $3 and some cents to get another one. I was much more concerned about delaying this process because I wanted to get it finished up. But in the end, everything worked out great. I have 10 lugs that are tapped correctly on the sides and the ends. And here is a photo of the tap, or half of the tap that broke off into the lug. And here is the other half of the tap in the lug. Of course, once that's in a lug, it's not coming back out. So that lug is now another test or mule one for testing my finishing process. So let's get on to that next step. My final end goal plan for the lugs, the brass lugs, is to age them or antique them. I like a much darker color than the shiny bright brass color. But before I can do that, I need to clean up all the edges. I'll clean up the outside edges where it's cut off with a hacksaw. I'll use my detail belt sander, power file, whatever we're going to call that. Slowly round those edges and get that cleaned up nice and smooth. You'll notice I rub that with my fingers each time to make sure it's nice and clean surface. And once I'm done doing the ends, then I will switch over and get the sides. I want those cleaned up also. No sharp edges. It's kind of important to get all the burrs out, any sharp objects off, because eventually I'm going to have to clean these and polish them up a little bit before I can put them in the acid solution. So they need to be cleaned up really nice and smooth. Before I can put them in the acid solution to get the patina finish, I need to clean them up really well. So first I'm using a Scotch-Brite pad to remove any imperfections, and then I'll get some 2000 grit sandpaper to take off that top layer. It does make it very shiny now. All I'm doing is put it in my drill press and hand tightening. I don't want to put it in very tight and leave indent marks. You can see right there how difference the finish is between where it's been sanded and not sanded. Again, Scotch-Brite again, and the sandpaper. After I've done this to all 10 lugs, I will soak them and scrub them with Dawn dish detergent, and then I will use rubbing alcohol to remove any grease, oils, anything else that could be left on them. I'll use some still photos to talk about the antiquing process I'm going to use. I'll put everything in a tub. I will want the brass tubes raised up a little bit from the base, so I put these bolts in there to lift them up from the bottom for more even coverage. I'll put a bag on there so I don't ruin that tub with the acid solution. And finally, I'll put the brass rods in there. This is the product I used to get the patina effect on the brass. I have to say it's worked, but I want it to be even darker yet. So I do like the finish, but I ordered another product that should even get it darker yet. Let me know in the comments if you like the color or if you think it should be darker yet. I'm really undecided on how to handle this. The previous day I'd tried doing this with my test pieces, my mule pieces, and like I said before, it came out nice, but it wasn't as dark as I wanted, so I doubled up on the solution, hoping that would make it darker. I put my drops in here, and I'll stir it up and shake it around to get it nice and evenly distributed. And then I'm going to do a time lapse on this over about a half hour, so hopefully you can see how it changes color. I left it about 2 hours total, but in the end, the last hour and a half made no difference. I'm trying to make sure they're evenly spaced, not touching each other. I don't want any spots where it's touching and wouldn't yet get the solution on it. About every 10-15 minutes I came out and stirred it. Again, I want to get the solution evenly distributed. I set up a time lapse, so hopefully you can see it darken over this half-hour time period. It moves around after I've stirred it each time, but you can actually see it get darker in there. That's kind of a cool effect. Here's a photo after the process has been done. The middle shiny one is one of my test pieces that's still the shiny and not processed, so you can see how much darker it is. I do like the effect, but I'm still not convinced. I don't want it a little bit darker. Chime in and let me know what you think. And here's a quick snippet of me installing one of the tube lugs. I ordered black hardware, so I have a black screw with an Allen wrench and black washer to go with it. You can see me insert it through, and then it lines up exactly right with the tube lug. It's nice having a CNC do these things because it lines up right every time. And I'll rotate the drum a little bit so you can see the tube lug as it gets attached. Hand tight both those. And I'll shift back the other direction and use the Allen wrench and tighten those up. And voila. Not bad at all. And now for a few beauty shots of the drum on my spinner. My camera, which is really my cell phone, does not do this justice. I really like how this finish came out. I'll do one complete circle on the outside, and then I'll go to the inside. Early in the video, I talked about how myrtle wood has a property where there's a color shift or the grain kind of shifts patterns as the light changes angles. This shows it. So if you look at a piece on the left side and watch it rotate through, notice how lights become dark and darks become light. It's really a cool effect. As I said before, I really like working with myrtle wood. It can be temperamental, but the finish comes out great. I want to thank everyone for making it to the end of the video. The drum, as you already saw in the video, it's coming along great. The shell is basically done now. Next step will be rims, and I'll install hardware. I haven't even ordered the hardware yet, so that's a ways away. Hopefully next week's video will be making rims. I'm going to try something that I've never done before, and honestly I've never seen before. I hate to claim I'm the first one to ever do something, but in my mind I am, but I don't want to make that claim because somebody somewhere has probably done something similar to this. But next week's video hopefully will be on rims. I have not made them yet, so if everything works out just right, you'll see that sound. So if you've not subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like. I did break 1,000 users last week, so I'm now above 1,000. Now I just need to triple my viewership time, and I might get a few dollars out of YouTube, so that's not going to happen very soon, if ever. Anyway, thanks for showing up for the video, and we'll talk to you next week.